My name is Kirby Lockard, and you're watching one of the Design Drawing Videotapes. These videotapes are a series of 10 videotapes designed to help students of architecture, landscape architecture, and interior design learn to draw freehand perspective sketches. Like the previous tapes, which are concerned with perspective construction and shadow casting, this tape requires that you draw along with me in order to get the maximum benefit from the tape. In fact, it's much more important that you draw with me and copy the drawings that I make than it is that you try to understand or listen intently to what I have to say. Learning drawing is much more a matter of learning a procedure of eye-hand coordination. Now, to do that, to draw along with me, you're going to need a simple set of equipment. You'll need two markers, one a medium marker and one a sort of fat marker in black. You need a black Prismacolor pencil. You'll need a roll of yellow tracing paper, which you may want to tear into sheets because we'll be using several sheets of that. And if they're handy, you'll need two colors of green Prismacolor pencils. In addition to that, you'll need Xerox copies of the exercises that came along with this videotape. If you have all that set of equipment, then we're ready to go. And this particular tape is number 7 in the series. It introduces the last 4 videotapes, which are concerned with finishing a drawing. By finishing a drawing, I mean all those elements that we add to the drawing as finishing touches. All the textures, which consist of building material textures, ground textures, leaf textures, and then the items of additional interest like human figures, trees, mountains, furniture, automobiles. And while these are the last things that you would add to any perspective sketch, they probably are the first things you should master in drawing. The main reason for that is that if you master this set of additional and textural interest items, your drawings will look much better to you. You'll no longer be disappointed in the final result and wish you had learned to draw the cars, the trees, the figures, and those finishing touches. That's what this set of tapes is about. We're going to begin with lettering. We will begin with learning several lettering alphabets. And this is the exercise that comes with the videotapes, and the very first alphabet is probably the most difficult. And you might call it vanilla. It asks you to letter the alphabet in letters that have absolutely no character. Their intention is that deliberately that you look right through them. You don't get hung up in any style of the letter. And it's the way cartoonists letter, so that you see the pictures or you read the message without ever even questioning the style of the letter. You notice that all the strokes are exactly vertical. All the crossbars are exactly horizontal, or as nearly so as I can make them. And the angles of the sloped letters are as nearly alike as possible. The round letters are as round as I can make them. And so you'd say, well, that's not much fun. That doesn't excite me to learn to letter that way. Well, that's why it's so good, is that it forms an example of the way you should draw all the things that you add to a drawing that are extraneous to the design. All the items of additional interest should be lettered in this way, or drawn in this way, so that they call as little attention to themselves as possible. Now, the second alphabet is a more stylish alphabet. It gains style by moving the crossbar of the letter up vertically. For instance, the A moves the crossbar up to there. Many letters are divided in half, and a letter like a B moves the division between the two loops way up to the top of the letter. The C and the D are not affected by the style. The E moves the crossbar way up to the top, as does the F, as does the G, as does the H. The I is not affected. The J comes way up high and perhaps becomes or could be mistaken with a U in that sense. The K is very short-waisted or long-legged, depending on how you want to look at it. The L is not affected. The M keeps the middle triangular portion well up to the top. And the N sort of sacrifices a little legibility to style. That really doesn't look much like an N, but the crossbar is held up there as an affectation or a little quirk in the lettering style. The O is not affected. The P pulls the loop way up to the top. The Q is not affected. The R pulls the loop up to the top and is very long-legged. The S does the same thing with a tight loop at the top. The T is not affected, nor the U, nor the V, but the W keeps its triangle near the top of the letter. And the X has its crossing way at the top, and so does the Y. And the Z has a smaller top and a larger bottom. I can say, well, that's kind of fun. Well, it's affected, it's self-conscious, and it calls more attention, perhaps, than is deserved to the style of the lettering. It is, however, an easy way to letter so that your lettering looks consistent. For instance, you can letter a series of E's, like the E's in this alphabet, and even though they really don't look very much alike, they're sort of held together by the fact that the crossbar is all near the top of the letter. And it's much easier to letter 4 E's and have them look pretty much alike in that stylish kind of letter than it is to letter the vanilla E's, the E's in which the crossbar is right smack in the middle and all the cross arms are the same length and dead horizontal, the kind that has no character at all. The next lettering style is very much like most architectural draftsmen use, and it relies on a tipping of both the ovals of the circular letters. They become ovals, slanted in a certain way, and the cross arms. For instance, the A kicks the cross arm up like that. The B slants the 2 loops in that direction, as does the C. So it's an oval that goes from lower left to upper right. The D follows that same sort of slope or slant. And the E kicks up all 3 of its cross arms, as does the F, as does the G, as does the H. This series of 4 letters always has 4 cross arms, and it gives you a big opportunity to make your lettering stylish. The I and the J are a little affected, as is the K. The L, again, kicks the bottom bar up. The M has nothing special, and neither does the N, nor the O. The P, the loop of the P, has that same accent on the slope. The Q, the whole oval shapes that way. R, S, the 2 loops of the S carry that same slope. T, U, V are a little affected, as is W, as is X, or Y, or Z. The whole last part of the alphabet, except for maybe the cross arms on the Z, are a little affected. Now, once again, the stylishness, the tilt of the letters, gives a certain consistency and coherence to the alphabet. The last alphabet at the bottom is a completely different kind. It adds not so much style as it does another level of detail. It adds the little ornamental ends to the letters that are called serifs, and that is S-E-R-I-F. So that a lettering style with serifs is called a serif lettering style, and the lettering styles without them is called sans serif, using the French. The D, E, F. Now this lettering style takes a little longer to letter, and so you wouldn't consider it except for major titling or when you had a limited amount of lettering to do. There is a set of rules that goes with it, as there is with most lettering styles. There's a very definite set of rules as to where these serifs go. For instance, there is seldom a serif on the bottom point of the M, and there is never a serif on the bottom point of the N. You'll see a lot of public buildings around the country with their N's mounted upside down, because whoever mounted the letters didn't understand that rule. The R has a nice curvy tail on it. The S has serifs on both ends. X, Y, and Z. Now, you should letter these following the sample at the top in several different sizes and practice them until you've mastered 3 or 4 of the lettering styles shown. It's very important that you gain a mastery of 2 or 3 ways of drawing almost everything, because it's only when you've done that that you understand the advantages or the disadvantages of the various lettering styles, and it's only then that you have any freedom of choice when you've learned to master those. One other thing I'd like to point out about lettering is that it's an excellent example of the kinds of things we're going to be learning. We draw figures and trees and furniture in the same kind of way. They're pieces of an alphabet which we'll later put together to form words, to write sentences, or maybe even poetry. But you can't do any of that until you have learned to make the simple letter forms out of which the English language is made and out of which the language or the graphic vocabulary which designers use must be made. Like all the other videotapes in this series, this tape is divided into 3 segments of approximately 20 minutes each, and we're halfway through the first segment. The other thing we're going to take up in this segment, or one of the other things, is the application of tones to drawings. For this, you'll need your black Prismacolor pencil and the exercise that comes along with the videotapes. What we're going to do is lay down a tone with a 45-degree, or approximately 45-degree stroke of the Prismacolor pencil. And you should draw with me, and the first thing we're going to do is fill in this first little square around the central white or light rectangle. Now, when you put down tones, you should put them down in parallel strips, sort of like mowing the lawn, like the passes a lawnmower makes as it goes down over a lawn. It doesn't make any difference if the strips are different widths. As a matter of fact, that's beneficial. You don't want it to look that precise. It needs to have a kind of a random handmade quality, but it must have all the stroking directions the same direction. Now, the other thing you need to learn in applying tones is the ability to heavy them up or make them slightly darker, adjust them, so that the final tonal range in your drawings can be adjusted as you make them. If you get them too dark, the only thing you can do is erase the pencil tones, so that it's better to kind of sneak up on the final values. So you keep making it a little bit darker and a little bit darker until you get it where you want it. This particular exercise, our goal is to make a second band then around this one of lighter gray, and an outer band beyond that that is very light gray. Now, I'll slow down a little so you can make your tones as well as you can, and don't be afraid to go back and patch the edges slightly. It's important to use the entire tonal range whenever you're adding tones. You don't want to make the tones all dark or all light. And when you first start out, it's sometimes a little difficult to get over a certain timidity. And you may be a little scared to really bear down on the pencil. But the ideal in this particular exercise is to get this inner band dark enough so that, and the progression of the light gray to the middle gray to the really dark tone, that when it works right, let me gray in just a little more to give it the best chance of working. When it works correctly, this interior white square will actually look whiter than the paper bordering the 3 bands, because of the contrast that you build up between this dark black band and this very light central white square. The top part of the exercise is simply meant for you to practice 3 different pencil tones. And here, the way to do it, get the most out of it really, is to try to start with, say, 3 fairly light tones. And as you move to the right, darken this tone so that it gets much, much darker. And darken this one so that it gradually gets darker. And leave this one just light. So you would begin over here with a minimum range of contrast from light to dark. And by the time you get out to this end, you should almost be solid black in this band. This band would have stayed the same, and this band would have gotten darker in proportion, so that here you have a much wider range of tonal difference from light to dark. All the drawing skills that we're learning on this videotape can be thought of as mental templates, sort of perceptual patterns in your mind that allow you to make a letter a certain way or even apply tones as we did in the last one. Your ability to make the letter A, for instance, depends on your having some sort of a model of A in your mind. If this is you sitting at your drawing board and you're trying to letter A, you have no hope of making a decent A, and particularly of lettering a whole alphabet that is consistent, unless you carry some sort of mental model that controls and judges what comes out of the end of your pencil. You can think of these in several ways. You can think of them very much like the green toilet templates that American Standard gives us, which allows us to draw bathroom fixtures. Or you can think of them as sort of pre-recorded videotapes, which you take the time to make, and then when you need to draw a tree or letter a certain alphabet, you can just sort of stick the videotape in your ear, and it allows you to play out that tape. Environmental designers need a very small library, really, when you think about it, compared to, say, commercial artists. For instance, I've never been called upon to draw an elephant or a sailing ship or a lot of very exotic, difficult kinds of things to draw. So you need a very limited library, but you have to take the time to pre-record those videotapes, or you'll never be able to draw the things that you need to. We're going to take on another series now of these that have to do with plants, with trees, leaf textures, and individual specimen plants. So the first thing we're going to do is practice drawing a leaf squiggle. Leaf squiggles are repetitive hand motions that allow you to lay down textures that represent either the leaves of a tree or the leaves of a plant, or they allow you to just draw a ground cover on a horizontal surface. This particular one is made like cursive M's. So you make M's in both directions and you change direction frequently. This has 2 really good uses. One of them is that it lies down very well. It looks like a horizontal surface because of the way it's applied, and so it's very useful to apply as a ground cover texture on any surface that you want to look like a horizontal surface. It also has the advantage of being able to dribble over or cascade down the edges of planters. So it's very good for any sort of trailing plant that might drape over a wall or drape over the edges of a planter. The opposite of this texture is what you might call a cursive S texture. So it's just like making cursive S's in handwriting in both directions, and you should change directions frequently. And it, like the first one, like the M stroke, is a very good texture for horizontal surfaces. It looks quite a bit like fallen leaves, and if you put it together in certain configurations, it can look quite a bit like junipers, like a juniper plant, or one of the other plants that has a sort of upward branching habit. Now, these 2 textures are good for horizontal surfaces, and they're probably the easiest 2 textures of the 4 I'm going to show you. The other 2 get just a little bit more difficult. The third texture is what you might call an architectonic texture. It's the most abstract, the least realistic. And like all the other textures, you put the pen on the paper and move your hand in a repetitive motion. In this case, each change of direction is rectilinear, or 90 degrees. although you sometimes go in a clockwise direction and then you can reverse and go in a counterclockwise direction. That makes no difference. The advantage of this is that it is a little bit architectonic and probably would look good in a more abstract kind of drawing against a rectangular building. Any of these leaf textures can be profiled at their edge by heavying up the boundary line whenever there is space behind the edge of the plant. The last texture is probably the most difficult, but maybe one of the best or the most worth learning. It's a completely random texture. It has no particular configuration, and because of that, it probably goes down faster than any of the others. It simply is a random squiggle. It's certainly not rectangular. It has loops, and it has some pointy places, but it's basically nondescript, and deliberately so. So it's deliberately random. And its biggest advantage probably is that it goes down faster than any of the other textures. These two textures are good for making stand-up plants, that is, plants that stand up vertically or have an oval shape. They don't lie down well. They're very difficult to put on a horizontal surface like the first two textures I showed you. We'll return to leaf squiggles a little bit later, but right now we need to move on to drawing trees. Of all the things that you can learn to draw and put into a retrievable graphic vocabulary, trees are perhaps the most useful, certainly for architects and landscape architects. They're useful because they add so much quality to your drawings, and secondly because they're so easy to draw compared to figures, compared to automobiles, compared to a lot of the more complex things you need to put in your drawings. So trees are very much worth mastering. You need to take the exercise, which came along with the videotapes, put it down and cover it with a piece of yellow tracing paper because we want to get in the habit of making these drawings as overlays. Okay, now, this exercise asks you to simply fill in the first templates here, or the first little patterns, with tree branches. And the way you do that is you start well down on the trunk of the tree and draw branches which go all the way out to this boundary line. Each line you draw, each branch needs to go all the way out to that line. Now that would normally be just a pencil guideline and you'd erase it in the final drawing, or you'd simply not repeat it in the overlays, because all it's there for is to discipline the branching so that they all stop at a particular point. Now I think you can see how quickly it becomes a decent tree. The second little pattern is a triangular pattern, and it differs from the first one in that the edge, instead of being an oval or circular boundary, is designed to stop along a flat line at the top. This is very useful when you're drawing orthographic drawings like elevations or sections, and the building is very rectangular, and you can use the trees to actually make a border to the drawing. This tree branch line will actually be the end of the drawing, and they can look quite handsome standing behind elevations or sections. The one at the bottom is a little more natural. It introduces three variations actually. The first one is that it's a multiple trunk tree, growing instead of from one single trunk, from three different trunks. It also has a branching habit which has a little hitch or dip in it. There's a little concave dip in each branch, or more than one, as they go toward the leaf boundary. And the leaf boundary line is oval and rather horizontal rather than being circular. So in a lot of ways, this is a much more natural or naturalistic looking tree. It resembles some of the trees that grow in our part of the country. The mesquite or the palo verde often have this kind of configuration. They often have wonderful, lovely, multiple trunk structures, and the branches have this interesting deformation to them. Now you notice that you can just keep densifying the edge with little bitty branches once you have the main structure set out, and it just keeps looking better. So there's a certain flexibility, a time flexibility, even in these three simple templates. They become a decent tree real quickly, and depending on the time you have, you can continue to embellish them until they become fairly decent trees. It's very important to have all these templates that allow you to draw items of additional interest in that flexible kind of form. Because sometimes you only have 15 seconds to draw a tree. Other times you find you may have a surfeit, an extra bit of time, and you want to come back to them and embellish them and make them better looking. So those mental videotapes that you have filed away for easy retrieval need to be in several different forms. There needs to be a very quick and dirty one, and then at the other end of that there needs to be a very elegant, detailed one. Now what we're going to do is go to the next step, which you'll be expected on the exercise to draw right there. Only I'm going to blow it up so that we can see better what the next level of sophistication is in drawing a tree. So please just take a blank piece of yellow tracing paper or any tracing paper and draw with me a circle or oval about that big on the paper. And what we're going to do this time is begin, let's draw a ground line just for a place to begin the tree, begin with a double line trunk indication, just that much. Now watch carefully the configuration we're going to make. We're going to make a Y that sort of spreads out like that. Okay? That's the first thing, is a Y-shaped stroke that begin as a two-line trunk indication and then split into a Y. We're going to add to that successive strokes which come in from the edge like that, follow along the trunk for a while, and then go back out. So we've now made two more Ys out of the beginning Y. We go into this one and do the same kind of thing. We come in until we can make a double line branch indication and then go back out to the edge. So we now have added two more Ys to that bigger Y. You just keep doing that same kind of pattern. You come in as a single branch indication and make a little bit of double line indication and then go back out. Now when we get to this point, we have to begin to plan our next branches. And in successive overlays, we'd have to correct these so that they look, I'd have to erase that little patch so it looks like I had thought of it initially. And what we're trying to do here is get several of the branches to cross one another, because the way this tree indication becomes so much more sophisticated is that it has depth. Once you begin to get one branch crossing in front of another branch, you've got to perceive the tree as occupying space in the drawing. It no longer can be just a flat decal that you paste on your drawings. And that's to be desired in drawing trees or figures or a lot of other items of additional interest. Now after a while you can say, well, I've got enough of that double branch indication. I'm just going to add more single branches out at the edge. Okay, now let's just keep doing that. Be aware of the overall form of the tree so that it's balanced and you're getting about the same number of branches everywhere in the tree so that one part of it doesn't look stunted or deformed. And then once in a while just put your pen down and look at it and say, well, where should I add another branch? Are there any other crossing opportunities? Well, maybe I could get one to cross like that. And some of these wind up being bad decisions, which in the next overlay, if you make it, you change. I think that last one was a bad decision. Let me show you another advantage of this kind of tree. You can put things behind the trunk, and because the trunk has thickness, those things, whether they're bushes or buildings or cars, disappear and reappear. So this bottom part of the tree has thickness, which allows you to indicate spatial depth. The top of the tree, on the other hand, has the great advantage of being transparent, so that right behind the tree, I can draw a building, and everyone will still see the building right through the tree. So the ability to draw transparent trees in foregrounds is very handy for landscape architects and architects. Now, the next level of sophistication, I'd like you to lay down another piece of tracing paper over the tree you've just drawn. And what we're going to do is add a leaf boundary. We're going to add an edge to the leaf mass of the tree. And in doing that, we have a couple choices. The leaf boundary I'm going to choose is a concave boundary. It's a boundary that looks like an oak leaf or a maple leaf or holly. It has concave indentations. Now when I add it, I don't want to just follow that regular circular form, because trees don't grow like that. They don't draw like that either if they're well drawn. What you need to do is make the leaf boundary deliberately ragged or random. And when you get about down to the bottom like that, you need to come across the tree, but come across the branches fairly high, like that. Now that's the front boundary of the leaf canopy. What we're going to do now is go back and add the lower back boundary of the leaf canopy. And this time, instead of crossing the branches, we're going to stop at each individual main trunk or branch. Now, if you have two colors of green Prismacolor pencil, I would color the back set of leaves, that is the underside of the tree. And first I need to draw in on this overlay because they're just there on the underlay. I need to draw that much of the tree branches that we see. Okay. Now, I need to continue coloring with the darker green that back underside of the tree, like this. Okay, now, if you wanted to, you could draw those branches, that branch structure that we did before, in there, and you would take it now to the new boundary line. You'd take it all the way out to that new ragged leaf boundary. But let me show you another thing you can do that's another successive step, and that's to make the upper part of the leaves opaque. And we can do that by simply drawing or dividing the leaf mass up into subgroupings. So we draw some using the same concave outline. We break up that entire mass of the leaves into little smaller pieces, kind of like this. I'm not real fond of this way of indicating trees. I think if you're going to begin to indicate the leaves, you ought to go on to the next step, which is to indicate every single leaf. But it's possible to make a fairly decent tree in this way. You can even color the upper clumps of leaves slightly different greens to indicate that they catch light a little differently. But I'd like to go on to the next way of drawing trees, which I think is probably sometimes worth the effort. We're going to take a leaf squiggle and turn the entire tree into a mass of leaves. We do that by taking one more overlay, and this time we take those divisions in the leaf structure. Let me line up my stack of overlays a little better so they match. Sometimes you have to do that too. You have to get them realigned or registered, we call that. Now, let's start with each one of those. You see that they're sort of ovaloid or spherical, and we're going to assume the sun is coming from this direction. And we're going to render each one of those with one of our leaf squiggles. I'm going to do the random one. Now we render the lower right-hand part of it dark, and then we render the upper part light, so that it transitions from a very dark lower right side to a very bright upper left side. We draw them as if they were each big popcorn balls. It's the best way I can describe it. So first of all, we get them shaded so they look like individual masses of leaves carried by their own branch structure. You no longer see the branch structure. It's buried in the opaque leaves. Okay? Just keep doing that. Now the other thing we have to do is make these ragged. We can do that later. We can come back and make them a little more natural and informal. But we don't need to do that now. The first thing for you to see is how the tree can be drawn as individual leaf clusters. And each one of those can have the effect of being lighted by a consistent sun direction. Now if it's working at all, my tree and your tree are beginning to look like real trees, all leafed out in the spring in sunlight. The maximum contrast we want is right here in each case. It's right where the darkest side of the upper left popcorn ball hits the bright sunlit side of the lower right popcorn ball. So maximum contrast wants to be right there everywhere in the tree. And I think without finishing the entire tree, you can begin to get the idea. You may need to practice your leaf squiggle a little more. You may need to go back and make those spheres a little more random, as I'm trying to do now. You can actually join two of them so that the distinction between two of them is kind of blurred. But generally what you want to do is make the entire tree look a little bit more natural and not so geometric as we started out. Now, the next thing we're going to do is take another exercise that came along with the videotapes and show you how you can take a leaf squiggle and turn it into a specimen plant, a single individual plant sitting in a planter. For this exercise, you're going to need the one that looks like this. It's meant to be a barren patio with simply places for plants and places for trees. And what you need to turn it into is one that looks like this, which has trees in some of the planter pockets and all of the planter pockets filled up with different kinds of plants, made with different kinds of leaf squiggles that have slightly different kinds of configurations. What we're going to do now is try to draw the specimen plants that go in these three planters in the lower right-hand corner. So lay down a piece of tracing paper over the exercise, and let's come down to these planters. The first typical specimen plant I'd like to show you is what might be called the firecracker plant, and it looks like a little explosion, and it can be drawn very quickly. You simply put the pen down in the planter like that, and then you draw a radiating series of spikes, just like a cartoonist might draw to describe an explosion. They look better in pairs, so you need to do the second one, a second one right next to the first one in the same planter. Now that's really very easy. It adds a great deal of figural interest to a drawing, and it looks great up in the foreground. It can hide people's feet, which are very difficult to draw anyway, and it makes a screen and adds a sort of figural interest to the drawing. Let's draw a similar kind of plant that begins with a point, except this time, instead of going straight out with bursts, we go out in a curved way, like this. But it still can be drawn fairly rapidly. Maybe the first couple of times you draw it, you have to take a little time. You may have to plan some of the leaves when you get near the end of the drawing, but most of the plant can be drawn very quickly. Now, those two are certainly worth mastering. I'd like to use the last planter we have left, the only one we have left, move it up into the middle of the camera screen maybe, and take just a little time talking about how to draw a plant in a planter so that it demonstrates the shape of the planter. And for this, we're going to use this leaf squiggle. Remember the M leaf squiggle? So we start right in the middle with the leaf squiggle, and we kind of get it going, and then we come over the edge like that. Now, we're going to try hard not to obscure the corners of the planter because they're very important. When we want to break over each edge and kind of dribble down the side, and one really important thing we need to do is show some leaves coming down here that have gone over the side of the planter and are reappearing behind the planter corner. Now, we can do that same thing over here, and we should. We should show some leaves coming out here. They help you understand that there's space behind the planter and around the corners of the planter. Now, you can get too cute with that so that the whole thing looks really contrived, but if you keep it naturalistic and don't make it too symmetrical or too obvious what you're doing, you can use the drawing of the plant to actually demonstrate the space of the planter. Now, we're going to leave trees and leaf textures and specimen plants. But please, if you had trouble keeping up with me or you had trouble understanding how to do this, please practice them. Come back to this videotape or somewhere in the margins of your notebooks. Find some time to draw trees so that the next time you have to draw a building or a patio or even an interior with an interior plant or a view out the window to a garden, you can draw the trees respectably. In the last segment of this introductory tape on finishing a drawing, we'll be talking about drawing figures. And the drawing of the human figures and their figure and its inclusion in architects and landscape architects and interior designers' drawings is generally conceded to be too difficult by some people to even try. I found that it's a lot of fun, it's very important to learn to do, and it makes your drawings a lot more human. The most important reason for including figures in your drawings, however, is to remind you who you're designing for. If the spaces you draw are very awkward so that the figures you put in them only can stand stiffly at attention and have no place to sit down or lean against or gather or congregate and do any of the human social interactions that are normal to people and comfortable to people, then maybe the spaces you're designing are sort of inhuman. They are more than anything else maybe a test of the scale, a test of the sort of gentle human quality that we value in spaces. So I think it's very important to draw the human figure. In order to do that, let's start with the exercises included with the videotape. Let me describe what the intention of that is. This shows some very rudimentary groups of figures. You can see that they're little more than bubble heads and then rectangular bodies, which you're expected to overlay like this and turn into decent figures. For instance, just to give you an idea, you would overlay this figure, add some elbow bulges, split the torso into two legs, and maybe then think about adding a collar, a vest sweater, make the figure look clothed, maybe a layer of hair, and perhaps glasses. So these blanks are intended for you to customize. They show figures in seated postures, they show various groupings, and you could show figures gesturing so that one seems to be talking and the other seem to be listening. You specify the social situation and whether the figure is young or old or male or female in each situation. In order to do this, in order to begin to draw figures, we need to have some ideal for the form of a figure. And so if you'll take a separate piece of paper and draw with me a balloon head, just an oval head, sloping shoulders, and then a rectangular body, just like that. Now, as we begin to add detail to the figure, one of the first things we do is give the figure legs, so that we split the body into two legs like that. If it's a male figure, we leave the pant legs square. If it's a female figure, let's draw another female figure over here, another figure. Same balloon head, same sloping shoulder, same rectangular torso. Here, we split the torso like this, make the legs pointy, and add a dress. Now, the next level of detail we do in drawing the figure is add what could be called elbow bulges. Unless we stand at rigid attention and make a real effort to hold our arms straight down to our sides, our elbows will always produce bulges in the profile of our figure. No matter how you turn, whether you're looking head-on at a figure or even sideways, the elbows will almost always produce a bulge in the overall outline of the figure. Now, when we come to the next level of detail, we need to talk a little bit about how we perceive one another. And we do most of the perception of another human being by looking straight head-on into their eyes. We do this because we need to judge the expression on their face. We need to watch the shape of their mouth and the little lines and subtle changes in their facial expression as they're talking to us. For this reason also, all our cosmetic effort is concentrated around the head. Hairdos, facial hair, necklaces, collars, neckties, earrings, cosmetics, we concentrate on the head, so that when you look at a human figure, you might say that the detail is concentrated kind of like this, mostly around the head, and then only gradually descending down the figure. So that's the way we'll learn to add detail to this figure template. We start with the head, and we concentrate on mastering those things which we see when we look at another person's face. So in order to study that for a moment, let's blow up some heads. And if you would take another piece of paper and just draw 3 ovals like this. We're going to pretend that these are department store mannequins without their wigs. If you've ever seen those, they're perfectly shiny, bald heads, human heads. Let's take the male heads first and begin by adding an ear, a sideburn, and we're going to draw these hair pieces just as if they were that, as if they were really wigs, which we plaster on the head much as you would a football helmet. So the first one we ought to master is maybe just a conventional haircut with sideburns and apart, and the kind of receding effect that happens to men as they get a little bit older, an extreme case of which you can see in me. And then let's take one that we might call a Prince Valiant haircut, where where the hair comes down over the ears a little bit, and maybe you see just a little bit down on the neck. This might also, let's make this one part in the middle. And over here you might again see just a little wisp of it down the neck, a little longer hairdo. Here the hair covers the ear. Now let's try the more mature gentleman like myself, which only has a little fringe around the ears. Okay, now the next level of detail while we're working with the male heads would be glasses. Let's try on this figure just a pair of rather large rectangular glasses. One of the reasons for adding glasses is that they're easy to draw. They're geometrical, and they tell you which way the person is looking. For instance, in this figure, in this head, if I want to tell you that the person is looking downward, I haven't done that yet. I can put the glasses on in such a way that they make the head appear to be tilted downward slightly. If I want to make this person look up, I can probably do it by just positioning the glasses a little bit upward. Didn't do too good a job of that. At all costs, I would avoid drawing the mouths and eyebrows of a face. I'll illustrate that a little bit with a set of female heads that we're going to draw below. Now let's draw 3 ovals below. And first of all, we'll add a hairdo which used to be called a flip, in which the hair is simply turned upward at the edges like this. We put the part in the middle on this one, and in the second one, we'll simply flip the hair inward in what is called a page boy, so that the hair flips inward like that. And in the last one, let's use the center part with the hair pulled back and just the indication of a bun at the back of the neck, so that this looks immediately like perhaps an older woman, like the male head above. Now, let me show you why it's dangerous to draw faces, why it's dangerous to draw actual eyebrows, eyes, and mouths in your drawings. What was a neutral drawing suddenly becomes a soap opera. What had been simply a neutral environmental design drawing, if you're not very careful, turns into some sort of emotional play. Everyone looks like they have some deep emotional problem, or their underwear is too tight, and you run the risk of preempting the whole design content that you're trying to get across. Glasses are safe, always safe. They add scale to the face, and they show which way the person is looking without getting into facial expression. Another thing that's reasonably easy and safe on males are mustaches. Now, the next level of detail is coming down from the head and is probably the collar. And there are several of those that are quite easy to draw. Turtlenecks, lapels with ties. And for women, we have collars like this, we have collars like that, and we have gowns with narrow straps. So this is the most important level of detail to learn to add to figures. Let's take a figure group now, which is... Stand by. We're about 10 minutes in, about 10 minutes and 30 seconds in. Okay. Let's go back to the full figure now and talk about composing individual figures in groups. So please draw with me an oval head like this, sloping shoulders, and the beginnings of a male figure. And right next to the male figure, let's draw a female figure, a little bigger hair mass, trunk split into pointy legs, dressed like this. And understand that whenever you put two figures in a drawing, you should never miss the opportunity to put one behind the other. It's really dumb if all your figures stand separately, isolated, so that there's space between each one of them. It's much better to have space behind them and in front of another figure, so that you always want to compose your figures so you could throw a paper airplane through them. It's this space between the figures that begins to make the group interesting. Now, let me also show you, we're going to use some more of your paper, but let's put down an overlay over this pair of figures just now, even with this very rudimentary underlay underneath it. Now, in drawing the figures in this overlay, let's add the elbow bulges. Let's give the foot just a little toe like that to help indicate which way the person is looking or facing. And up here, let's go over the head and in such a way that we can draw a second thickness of hair. It can be very simple, no more than that. Okay, now in the female figure, let's make an elbow bulge and make a little flip on the hair like that, and one over here. And in this elbow bulge, let's stick the arm out quite a bit like that, so that there's a hole between the elbow that we can see through. Let's take a little more time drawing her legs, and perhaps indicating high heels. And now you can see, I think, based on that underlay and having the comfortable feeling that you're going over something and you can now improve it, it's much easier on the second pass to make much better figures. The thing I wanted to show you here is that you can extend the man's hand like this. All you need to see is a little mitten extending beyond the female to understand that there's space behind the male figure and that they're standing one in front of the other. Now let's clothe them, which we haven't really done yet, and when you add clothing you should do it in the simplest possible way. For instance, the simplest garment I know of is a sleeveless sweater, a vest sweater. And if we want, we can add a little collar to that, but the figure very quickly looks like he has clothes on. The same for the female figure. One of the easiest garments is the jumper, the sleeveless jumper. We don't have to draw the cuffs. We don't have to draw many details at all. We simply have to draw the armholes and the neck holes, and the figure suddenly becomes clothed. Let's also try glasses on the guy. If there's any doubt about which way he's facing, there is no longer that doubt because he's looking at the woman who he's talking to. Okay, now the group becomes even better when you can add a third figure. So let's add a third guy, and this guy can be more in profile. He can be standing there like that, and he's rougher than the other two because he hasn't yet had the benefit of making an overlay. But there he is. And the one thing I wanted to show you about that is you should never plant your figures at the same dimension on center like you would 2x4s. It ought to be a different spacing between these two figures than it is between these two, because what you're striving for is sort of a planned randomness in the way you put figures into a drawing. You want to avoid any kind of regimentation and make them look natural and human as people behave. The next thing I'd like to do, well, I can still do it while we have this drawing and save you a little paper. I want to ask you to profile these two figures. Now, spatially profiling anything means going around the outline of it with a heavier line. And there's a lot of opportunity in doing this because you can move that line thickness to one side or the other so that when you go up the person's neck, you can make a bulge at the ear. You come over the hair like this, you can emphasize that place where the hair changes to skin, out over the glasses, the chin. You can indent the collar so that you recognize that thickness. And when you come to the female figure, you just transfer the outline to her. You go up over her hair. You can make a little indication of thickness there at the shoulder strap of the jumper. Come down her arm, transfer the profile line to his hand, and you can maybe improve the thumb a little bit. Come down her figure like this. Now you also profile the holes between the figures. You profile this hole between his legs and down her leg like that, and you profile this hole. Now what this does is make a difference between the interior detail lines and the outside profile of the two figures as a group. You see, what we're doing is profiling them collectively so that they come together and are profiled and emphasized as a single object. I'd like to talk about different postures that you can place figures in now while we're still working with full figures. So if you have room on your piece of tracing paper, you can just draw it. I'm going to have to extend mine just a little bit, and I want to take a moment to talk about seated postures. All along we're assuming that this is 5 feet from a figure's eye level to their feet. If we divide that in half, we get 30 inches, which is about the height of the back of a seat. And then if we divide it in again, we get just about seat height. Now, if you've done that with me, you can now draw sort of a rectangular blob like this that becomes the trunk of a figure, a seated figure. This is their shoulders, this is their seat. You need to be able to draw the legs of a figure, and you should always draw them asymmetrically. And the seated legs of a figure do some pretty sophisticated things. First of all, they give the figure depth, because the upper leg is foreshortened. The distance from the hip to the knee is only that far, but the bottom part of the leg is seen full length. Now, the only way that can happen is that the figure is now occupying depth. The best example I know to show you what that means is that when I was a kid, and still I think they're available, the little cardboard skeletons that have riveted joints, and you buy them and hang them up in the window at Halloween, or you shake them on the string and the limbs kind of move around. Those guys are only about a 32nd of an inch thick. They're literally just one thickness of cardboard. And you always see every single limb full length. They will never occupy depth. They're perceived as being flat like a decal. And one of the levels of sophistication you need to reach is to be able to draw your figures so that they occupy space, the same way as we talked about in trees. With the upper arm, if you put this guy's upper arm on the back of the seat like that, and then you draw his hand draping over like that, you can see that we've done the same thing with the arm. The forearm occupies almost no distance, no dimension at all, but the upper arm is seen full length. Do the same thing with the lower arm by coming down like this and then just drawing a hand on the kneecap. We have foreshortened the upper arm, the lower arm, and still shown the upper arm full length. In this way it is that we begin to get depth in the figures. We'll return to figure drawing in 2 of the successive tapes in this series so that you'll understand how to place them into perspectives, how to combine them with other elements to make finished drawings. But you can practice them anywhere on a piece of notebook paper. Notebook paper always has lines, and all you have to do is say, I'm going to draw a 2-space figure in which the head or eye level line is there and the feet are there. Or you can draw a 3-space figure or a 4-space figure, and they're wonderful to practice and very quick to practice, and you should begin to do that so that you'll be able to include figures in your drawings and understand how humans might or might not use the spaces you design.